And we're the boys.
Yeah.
Oh, we're the boys.
We're
the boys.
We're the boys.
We're the boys.
We're
And
the
Anna
boys.
is a boy, and Mitch is a boy, and Chris is a boy, and Tim is a boy. And together we're the boys and the boys.
Hey guys, welcome to another podcast.
This is the Boys Podcast with Mitchell, Tim, Chris, and Sheri. The real and original boys back together again.
Yeah, that's how we roll.
That's how we stop, drop, and roll, y'all. So, on the previous one, hopefully the previous one, we talked about mothers, and we talked about good experiences and things that made us feel close to our mothers, and we essentially just remembered memories about moms. And so now we're going to do the same thing with fathers. Hopefully it's just as good. Maybe even better. So, if none of you have anything, I'll start with mine.
Yep, go for it.
And so, the last one we kind of had a relatability of like sickness and then normal stories. I don't know what we're going to do with this one, but we'll just find out as we go. So here's one thing I remember from when I was real young that I used to have so much fun with. Essentially, that I like identified with my father and like having a fun time. And it was that when we were younger, we used to do this thing where he would like tickle us and we'd try to tickle him. But we'd, like, line up for some reason. And so, like, one of us would go over and then be tickling, and he's tickling them, and then they'd, like, run away because they can't handle it.
Right.
And then the next person would go. And it was just this beautiful, like, experience for me of being like, oh, I'm spending time, I'm having fun, we're trying to tickle, and he's tickling us, no. And then, like, and then running to the back of the line, right?
Right.
It was a great experience for me.
That's a good memory. I like that.
Yeah. Anyone else got anything?
Feeling.
It didn't have a real long story, but it was definitely a nice memory.
Straight to the point. Yeah, we had wrestling times with Dad.
Yeah.
That was fun.
But we don't have to tell his story.
Oh, it made me think of it.
Yeah,
We're not-
I
yeah,
think
we can.
one of my treasured memories of my dad would be whenever he like stops what he's doing, like, and
I so know where you're going with this.
yeah, and just stops what he's doing because that means something to me.
Yeah.
Whenever,
That's beautiful.
Whenever I like come in, you know, even at the office or whatever, like even if he's in the middle of an email, sometimes like if he has to finish his sentence because he's got to remember what he's got to say or focus, then he asks me to like wait like 1 minute and like, but like normally like he'll stop what he's doing and he'll talk to me and he'll have like sometimes a long conversation and meaningful conversation and ask me questions before he'll ask me if like he can get back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that means a lot to me because like if you know, if he were to just say, oh, I got stuff to do, then like the chance of me being there to be able to talk to him would leave, and I wouldn't be able to talk to him.
And you'd also feel undervalued.
Yeah.
Like, my dad's work is more important than what I have to
Yeah,
say.
and that's how I felt when I was a kid.
Right.
Like, cause he was very busy and he was just trying to figure stuff out, but
Yeah,
I don't know whether he
didn't have it learned before
Right.
he had us. He learned it because I remember him talking about that to me.
Yeah. And
so
that's
I
true.
think he learned it like through like maybe in the past couple of years, and it's like amazing.
That's
and
awesome.
I love it. Yeah, and like also like him, it was that, and there was the one other thing of I don't remember. I'll remember later.
I do have, like, this isn't about my dad, but this is about yours.
He's kind of your dad.
He's really not. No, there's way too much history
Yeah.
for us to be.
Oh, you guys are brothers, yeah.
But he
Yeah.
totally is like your dad.
He's really not.
But you're right.
Well,
But he
he's
totally
your
is.
landlord father, you know.
Oh.
It's weird to think of him as my dad because I still want to pester him like I'm 6 years old.
Yeah.
There's still
you
that
guys
little
still-
drive in me.
You guys still... I
And
gotta check.
there's a couple of things I really appreciate about Mark because he is such a serious guy and he carries such heavy burdens on his shoulders.
Yeah.
When I am able to bring out his goofy side, I love it because it's not something I see that often.
Yeah.
So like if I can, like, I remember this one time I was sitting at the kitchen table and Debbie was sitting next to me and she was in between Mark and I. And she was looking directly at Mark, so her face was turned away from me. And she was telling him about this. She'd gone to get her eyes checked and her eyes were dilated. And when she was looking at the pad to punch in her debit card security key, like, her eyes were blurry from being dilated. And so she's telling this story and Mark is like looking at her, but I'm like right in Mark's eye line, so I'm like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, but like I'm just mouthing the words. So he's like, and I'm like nodding really emphatically, and then he'd start cracking up and Debbie was like, never mind, you're not even listening to me. And I'm like totally behind it, and then Mark is like, he's smiling, but he's like, no, I'm listening, I promise. You said you went to the debit machine, you couldn't see the numbers. And then she's like, okay, so she starts trying to tell the story again, and then
I think I remember.
and I do it again, and Mark, I can tell I can make him laugh because he's just in that mood, but he's trying not to because he can tell Debbie's getting a little bit annoyed, and then he totally does it, and Debbie's like, never mind, you obviously don't care, and I'm like, Debbie, I was listening, don't worry, I heard what you
You ruined it for him and then just sucked it all in yourself.
Yeah, like I'm the good person. And
This is how Debbie found out.
That is, no, I did tell Debbie it was me, but that is a perfect example of the type of relationship we had when we were kids. Because I would manipulate situations where he would get into trouble.
That's fun.
And so, but in a really fun, not mean-spirited way, but like, you know, I always got a bit of a kick out of getting him into trouble. So
That's fun.
I love that memory of him, and I love it that I can still, as old as we are, I can still bring that side out of him, and I can still, and he totally doesn't trust me, and he shouldn't. Because every time we hold hands at the table, if we're going to say a prayer, like I'll like twist his hand, or I'll like tickle his palm, and then like he won't be able to take the prayer seriously, and then I'll be like, Mark, like, come on, grow up. Like, you need to stop behaving like that.
That's
and
great.
then my dad will be like, Mark, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I didn't do anything. That's why I don't hold hands with you at prayer, you know? He gets riled about it, but
That's so good.
yeah, it reminds me of how we were when we were kids.
Yeah.
So that's one memory I have of Mark. And the other one is when he relaxes, like when, and we've talked about this before, like there was a night that he came down and he didn't have any meeting he was rushing out to. He just came down stairs, sit on the couch, was like, what are you guys watching as a movie? He had a beer. I think we actually had a couple beers, like to the point where he was like just really relaxed, and he was joking, and his like body posture was really relaxed, and he was like, when he gets to like laugh genuinely and laughs out loud, and you can tell that he's relaxed, I love that, because I don't see him that relaxed to that extent very often. But when he can just relax and just laugh, and you feel like he's just mellowing, oh, I love that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. Can I tell a story about him?
Yes.
Because he's kind of my family too at this point, right?
Sure.
So I actually have a story that I really like about Mark as well. And what it is well, first of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate when he was hanging out with us for Tim's bachelor party, like around the fire.
Yeah,
like,
that was
and
awesome.
He put up with our shenanigans of singing crazy songs, and then he sang a really meaningful song.
Yeah.
He got way more views on iTunes. And anyways, but what the time I really appreciated him was when I just did like the silly me, where it was like summer and it was like real nice weather, and so I went outside with Tim and we were doing something on the lawn, and I was like, I want to just lay down on the driveway, and then Tim was like, well then why don't you? And so I went and I laid down, and I was like, this is nice. I was like, you have no idea, this is beautiful, because the tar's warm but the air's cool. I was like, it's beautiful. And so Tim came and he laid down next to me. He was like, wow, this is really great. And then we just laid there staring at the sky and watching the clouds. And then like Chris like saw us. He's like, "What are you guys doing?" And then Jim was like, "Chris, come lie down with us." And then Chris came over and laid down with us, and we all looked up at the sky, and we were like watching the clouds, and we stayed there for like 10 minutes, and then they started being like, Dad, come out here. And then they do the thing they did where they're like, bark, when he's not responding to Dad.
Yeah.
And so then he comes out, and he's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
And then we're like, come on, lie down, let's look at the sky. And then he did. And he just laid there and he chilled, and we were all looking at the sky, and we were all talking about the clouds and being like, oh, that one looks like this, and then being like, oh, I can see. And it was literally a childhood memory, but while we were complete adults.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful.
I remember when you guys did that.
Yeah, and then that's probably because like Debbie came out and took a picture.
She took a picture.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, but that's one of the moments I appreciate the most, when he like was like, you know what, I'm down. Let's like hang out. Let's do this weird thing that people don't do, and lie down on a driveway, and then just look at the sky and wonder, and just goof around talking about what the clouds look like.
Like,
it was beautiful.
Even with all that he carries on his shoulders, he can still compartmentalize it enough to recognize when he needs to involve himself in those little moments.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
It's memorable.
What about you, Chris? Anything on your dad?
For like what, just general, or is it fun times, or like
anything?
Was there
like
something meaningful?
Yeah.
To you.
Whether it's because it was fun, whether because it was like emotional, anything.
There is no wrong answer.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it could be the time he made you smoke.
Maybe don't talk about that.
We did that on the previous podcast already.
Oh, did we?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, we did.
again, I mean, just at one point, so I would never really kind of talk to them that much. Usually I'd go to other people. And this was like about 2 years ago.
About what?
When I got out of high school, when it started. Like, I never really talked to them for their advice or wisdom or whatever, and they never pushed it on me either. Like, it was like, yeah, they had advice, but I never kind of went to them really, and I never received it. But I think it was like seeing, I don't want to say the person, but there's like, they do like marriage counseling, and seeing them do it with them, I was like, I never thought about it, but I guess why not I just go to them? They're right here, and they can tell me advice instead of me going to other people for advice.
Right.
Like, why can't I just go for them if they're doing it?
They're counseling other people.
They're counseling other people. Like, shouldn't I be, letting them counsel me as well?
Yeah.
So then once that, because I never thought of it that way, but once I looked at it that way, I was like, So then I just started more and more as I started in the routine and stuff, doing it and going to them, and so now it's just like, especially my dad, like, there's seasons of us like going and sitting by the fire and we're just staring at it together, us worshiping together, us journaling together. Now it's just a lot of time of like me asking questions and sharing what's happening in my life, and him,
And you've also
giving an
begun
input.
to develop a bit of a bond through golf, I've noticed.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Like, it's starting that.
Yeah. It's getting there. And, but yeah, so like just the, loving the discipleship, with him, and like gleaning from him, it's a really cool experience. And then, yeah, I mean, golfing will, go out every once in a while when I can push him to do it, because it is a weird thing to get out and do golfing, and it takes a lot of time. It's usually hot,
Like it is right now.
and you so that, and then also like he's been, him and Mom, I think, but I mean him a lot, has been like upping his photography game.
Ooh.
And my mom has too. They both have been really upping their photography game. And like sometimes he'll show me them, and like, yeah, he's got like some really good pictures now.
Which you are also developing your photography.
Which is why
And sometimes we went out together and like took some pictures.
We had such a great conversation last night, Mitchell, Chris, and I, about Chris's photography.
Yeah.
That was good.
1% for me.
And then Mitchell's music. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I guess.
And then this morning, Sheri's writing.
Yeah. about like connecting in the way that you're talking about, like finding something that can connect you both and like bonding over it. I love movies, and my mom is not like that. She's more like, why do people watch fictional things? We should care about the real world and real world issues, not about fiction. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's about inspiring and it's important. She's like, no. But my dad loves the things that I love, which is superhero movies. And so me and him constantly bond over superhero movies. He especially loves like Iron Man and that type of thing, and like all of the different suits. So whenever like we're together, we constantly are talking about the different like superhero movies that are coming out and things that happen. And he loves spoilers, so he's like the one person who, even though he hasn't watched the movie, I can like actually talk about the movie with him.
Right.
And he'll be like, oh yeah, tell me, and then we'll just like talk about it, and then he'll be like, whoa, that happened with Iron Man? I can be like, yeah, he did this type thing. He's like, oh, I heard that was really cool. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's superheroes brought me and my father together, and I would like to say that Marvel is endorsing this. No, but Marvel brings families together is the summary of this podcast. Hashtag no sponsor.
Hashtag no sponsor. Well, I have like I was talking about Mark before, but I do have some good memories of my dad. But like, because he was a minister and like really involved in the church and really busy, like Mark was for you guys, I didn't really get a lot of time with him. But once in a while, I'd say maybe 6 or 7 times in my youth, my dad would take me out for daddy-daughter dates. And it was usually just like early morning breakfast somewhere, and
Nothing like that.
like it's the best. And we've kept that up as I've gotten older. Like when I would work night shifts, he'd be like, oh hey, like, you know, if you're in Hamilton, and I'll come and we'll go have some pancakes or whatever, you know. And so we've always kept that sort of breakfast date going ever since I was a kid, and sometimes that might be the only time I would have his entire ear for maybe a year. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it was very, very special to me to have that like uninterrupted time, and then actually feel like I'm enough of a value that he's willing to, you know, dedicate his unlimited attention to me. So yeah. And the other memory I have of my dad was when he was taking care of my mom when she was battling the last stages of cancer. He was so gentle with her and never made her feel bad or like she was a burden. He always talked to her very kindly. And one time, and this was when she was like, she couldn't get out of bed anymore, and he would like curl up on his side and like put his arm around her, like over her stomach, and just like curl up next to her and like cuddle with her, even though she was like not even really there at that point. He would like kiss her and say, I've loved you my whole life, and you know, you've been such a good wife and mother, and just these beautiful things which I never would have been privy to if I hadn't been like living there part-time, because I was a caregiver for the last 4 to 6 months, and I'd hear these moments they would have together, where Dad would just whisper these beautiful things into her ear and be curled up next to her on the bed. And I do have a black and white picture of that picture of my dad being like lying next to my mom just before she passed away. So there was definite gentility and kindness, and like those aren't character traits I would naturally associate with my dad. Like I would see him more as like an active go-getter, doesn't know how to stop, doesn't know how to relax, but like tries really hard to be positive, maybe has some hurts from his past he hasn't worked through, but tries to stay positive even in spite of them. But like to see him on that level of being totally devoted to his wife and being loving and tender, it was very, very sweet. know that got a little bit like
No, that's
sappy,
great.
but
That's great. That's what we want here. We don't just want just funny all the time. I mean, I do.
we want some juicy stuff here.
Yeah. Now let's talk about our Father, Jesus Christ. But anyone
Yeah.
else got any stories or things they want to share? Talk about when you cry.
Okay. Yeah, I remember crying.
Nice.
Mainly him spanking me, that was the reason.
Awesome.
Oh, that is such a good bonding moment.
Yeah.
It is.
Really taught me to come to reality. It woke me up.
Yeah.
After half an hour to an hour, it woke me up.
spanking never worked with me. Never. I could take it way longer than they could dish it out.
Right. Was there ever a time that it worked?
Well, no, it's just because I was too stubborn to admit that they were having any effect on me. So even though like I was stinging and my bum was swollen, I'd be like, are we done now? Like, meanwhile inside I want to cry because I'm in so much pain. I'm like, are we done? Can I go now? Like, this is stupid. Like, and then I would get spanked even harder, but it didn't matter. I was just like, yeah, it did not work on me at all.
I feel like spanking should be for discipline, not to get submission. In other words, you spank, and if they're like, I'm not affected by this, it's still like, okay, well, I spanked you, and that is it. Not to be like, well, I'm going to spank you until you're hurt.
Until you're crying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of...
But they're trying to teach me a lesson.
For
and
sure, and I understand. I agree with the initial thing. Whoa, is that Toronto? Is that Toronto that we're looking at?
Yeah.
Toronto's beautiful. Someone take a picture.
But I don't know. Is it about teaching you a lesson? Oh, that's interesting.
Discipline.
Yeah, it's the lesson should be that there is consequences to your actions, not that you need to feel bad. Like, it's just like, this is what happens when you choose wrongly. There's a consequence to it.
And then I think if the consequence doesn't work, or like I continue to do the same behavior, then you change the consequence.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, spanking just made me more stubborn.
This creates an interesting conversation. If no one else wants to continue talking about specific things about fatherhood, this creates an interesting conversation because we're all talking about positive memories as far as like, oh, this was when I was happy, but things can also happen that are more disciplined, but that doesn't mean they're bad things, and they do help us to grow as people, and sometimes it's things that your parents do that you don't appreciate at the time that actually is the thing that helps you grow the most as a person.
So what would be a
But I thought
time?
we were talking about fathers, so that would still be talking about us, but what about what's a positive thing that shows you something positive about your father?
My point is, isn't something like spanking a positive experience? Not at the time, but isn't it positive for the change that happens and the fact that they are giving it to you as a way of trying to help you?
Well, yeah, like I guess the one positive thing was sometimes my dad would explain why he was doing it, and he would even explain how many he was going to give me.
Right.
Even if one of them wasn't hard enough, like say he missed or something, or I don't know, he wasn't paying attention, it still counted, and so he was clear, and that helped me understand a lot now when I process back to it, because I'm like, okay, I know what I got spanked for, and if I didn't learn from it, it's my fault. He was trying to give me guidance. That's all the spanking is. You know, he's like, this is wrong, and I'm not okay with it, and so you will be disciplined.
That's crazy. It makes me think of it, and like I never really could remember much about spanking, but that just made me remember. Yeah, he would give us the amount of spanks we would get, and it'd be so scary waiting for him to spank you.
That's the worst.
Just the tension of waiting, like.
Especially when he's like, for my family, he was. Sorry, I apologize, my good friend.
And
a lovely person.
so it would be be so scary waiting, and then he would spank you, and you're like counting down to the last spanks, and then after you would break down. Yeah, sometimes. You'd break down, and then you would. He would just like hold you.
Mm-hmm.
He would hold me, and like you would hug it out, and you would just like cry, and like you'd like say your apology type thing, and
Wow, that's great.
and then he would like, I love you, and it was like, yeah, I never really remember that, but that
And
kind
it's
of
one of those
sparked my
things where,
memory.
like,
It's interesting.
you would usually think,
Like
oh
it
no,
brought
that's a
healing.
negative memory because it made me cry. But when you think about the fact that he was there and he was open and he allowed that to happen, and that he didn't like just leave you and go, yeah, you should be sad or anything like that.
Yeah.
He was there to comfort you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like he wanted to walk
Stern
through.
compassion.
Like the thing that used to irritate me was when they say this hurts me more than it hurts you, and it's like, yeah, no, it doesn't. But now I actually kind of understand that because they want
No
to be
one
your
wants to.
friend. They want to be kind to you. They don't want to upset you. And so there's an emotional turmoil, I would imagine, about like having to discipline harshly when you would rather that the kid just behave, but you can't expect a kid to behave if you haven't given them the skills or taught them their boundaries or like, do you know what I mean? Because if you never train your child to understand boundaries,
Yeah.
they're always going to be looking for it.
And that's the thing. That's
You
what
know?
our parents do to us. Like we say we appreciate when they were nice to us, but for who we are and the righteousness we have, it is their discipline that has helped make us this way, and that is kind of the thing we should also appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you definitely don't appreciate it at the time.
Right, I'm tired of you guys talking all negative and this negative subject. You guys need to change it because
It's
this is unrighteous.
positive.
This is unchristian.
I have a
What are you talking
It's
about?
not negative.
No,
It's
no,
completely
I do have a
positive.
positivity. Another positivity.
no, I know, but I'm referring to a previous conversation with
Yeah.
Mitchell about.
Oh, they talk about nice things.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing about my dad, and maybe you guys can actually identify with this, because there are some things that like mothers do more of, and then sometimes there are things that dads do more of. And mothers, or at least for my mother, she was one who like was very focused on saving money, which makes a lot of sense.
That's so interesting. That's same thing.
Yeah, and then my dad, he also would save money because we couldn't make him. But the other thing he would do, when we would go out somewhere, like we wouldn't be going out with each other for any reason, we'd just be going out together, and then he would, like, lots of times he'd be like, hey, do you want me to get you an ice cream cone? And it's just that simple thing of like, hey, let's go to McDonald's and buy an ice cream cone. And it's one of those things that builds
Little
a
treats.
like appreciation.
Like father,
just
like
off
a
of
daddy
very,
day.
like simplicity, right?
Yep.
Like a simple thing that just by doing it, just being like, oh, hey, we're out, I have a little bit of money, why not?
Yeah, and I remember Mark and Deb used to do that for Toonie Tuesdays at KFC.
Oh yes.
Remember? That was your
the
big
best
night.
memories.
I
Yeah.
feel like I remember that, which is weird.
Probably brought you along sometime. But yeah, like
And they would save up a whole week for that. Like back
That's
when they
great.
were like struggling financially, they would save up
Ooh,
to buy Toonie Tuesdays. Like, yeah,
I have another
which is
good
crazy
one.
to think because it's Toonie. It's a Toonie.
I know, but
But they literally was counting the pennies for
Yeah.
everything.
Hey guys, I have a negative memory that's a positive memory. You ready for this? So, when I was going to NCC, my family was having some financial issues, so my dad took a part-time job as the janitor who would come and work after school.
All right, you told me.
Right?
yeah,
And so, I actually became his assistant, like helping out, like doing things he wanted, like washing desks and like sweeping floors, vacuuming, mopping floors, things like that. And I was very underpaid. I was given like $1 a week, which was like, hey, now that I'm older, I'm like, that was like stealing. But either way, it was a thing. But that experience did, even though at times I didn't enjoy it, or at times I was like, oh man, but feeling like I was his assistant, feeling like I was working under him was an enjoyable thing. Especially when And it's one of those things when you grow up, you're like, oh, wait a second, he was saying that to try to get his way. But what happened was, I had mopped the floor, and I had, like, worked really hard to mop every aspect of it. And then he had come, and he'd been like, wow, you did a really good job. Like, you did even better than I would have. And then he, like, gave me, like, praise for it, and it made me feel, like, proud and made me happy. And he was like, you should always mop the floor, like that type of thing, right?
Right.
Which at the time I was like, oh, maybe I will because he's proud of me. But at the same time, it was something that was meaningful, and I do believe that he wasn't just saying it as a way to get me to do what he wants, but as a way to, like, give me a compliment to show that he appreciates me, which was very meaningful.
That's good.
Yay!
Off to the park.
Please download this and listen every day.